Prisoner B-3087, Chapter 20. Sometimes in the morning, prisoners didn't wake up. They were dead or dying. The guards would come in and beat their bodies to make sure they weren't faking it. And while we were gone to roll call or on a work detail, the bodies would disappear, carted off to the furnaces to burn like the rest. One morning, the man in the bunk next to me didn't wake. I knew what death looked like by now. Death and I had become old acquaintances. We knew each other when we passed on the street. This man was dead, I was sure. "What is it?" another prisoner asked me. He was a boy like me, maybe 1 or 2 years older. "This man is dead," I told him. The boy poked him to be sure, then looked around to see if the capos were coming yet. "Go through his pockets," he said. "What?" I said. I was momentarily surprised by his words. "See if he still has any bread on him." It sounded awful, but if the man did have food on him, he definitely didn't need it anymore. I put my hands in the pockets of his striped jacket and found a lice-ridden piece of bread from last night's dinner. I brushed off the lice, tore the bread in half, and gave half to the other boy. We scarfed down the bread before the capos came. The boy introduced himself to me as Fred. I told him my name, Yannick, not B-3087. I hadn't spoken my name to anyone for as long as I could remember. Fred and I shook hands. It was the first intentional contact I'd had with anyone at the camp since Uncle Moshe had died. We were all the time touching other people, lined up at roll call, at work, in line to get food, in bed at night. But I hadn't shaken hands or hugged anyone on purpose in months. It felt good to connect with someone, even though Uncle Moshe's words came back to me again. "You have no name, no personality, no family, no friends, nothing to identify you, nothing to care about, not if you want to survive." Fred and I stood together at roll call, but of course we didn't say a word to each other the whole time. When it was time for work detail, we were assigned together to the gravel pit where we worked side by side breaking rocks. "Where are you from?" Fred asked me while we were working. I hesitated, remembering Uncle Moshe's warnings. But Fred was the first person close to my age I'd met since hiding under the floors at Plazal with Isaac and Thomas. I loved just talking again, being human. "Krakow," I told him. "Me too," Fred said. We compared streets and discovered we had grown up not too far from each other. We even went to some of the same parks and stores. "Every day I would walk my sister to school down Krakusa Street," he said, remembering. Then he got very quiet. "Where is she now?" I asked. "She and my parents came here with me. I was sent to the right. They were sent to the left." I knew what that meant. We all did. His family was dead. Overhead, we heard the drone of airplanes, and we all looked up. "British planes," someone whispered. I didn't know how they could tell, but I hoped they were right. British planes meant the Allies were advancing, taking the fight to the Germans. The Allies were the forces aligned against Germany, England, France, America, and the rest. The capos cracked their whips and made us all get back to work. But soon we heard explosions in the distance. The Allies were bombing close by. "Sometimes I wish the Allies would drop bombs on us," Frank said quietly. "Blow this place to bits, and all the Nazis and capos with it. And me too." "We can't give up," I told him. "We have to survive." Fred tried to smile, but I could tell he was still thinking about his family. He didn't say anything more the rest of the morning. It was only at lunch that he felt like talking again. He lifted a spoonful of the tepid, flavorless broth and poured it back into his bowl. "You know what I'm going to do first thing when I get out of the camps? I'm going to buy a big, warm, golden loaf of bread. Then I'm going to slice off a thick piece and I'm going to spread butter all over it and eat it in 3 bites. I laughed. "I'll take 5 pastries, and bagels. 3 of those. With cream cheese, carrot cake with walnuts, chocolate pudding." Just talking about all that delicious food made my stomach rumble, but it was fun to dream. We kept up our running menu all through work in the gravel pit that afternoon and into the evening in the barracks while we lay next to each other on our shelf. "Fresh challah bread," I said, "sauerkraut, mushroom soup, stuffed cabbage. "Will you two shut up about food?" a prisoner near us yelled at last. "I can't stand it any longer." Fred and I laughed, but we stopped. It was best that we got as much sleep as we could anyway. We had a hard day's work ahead of us and nothing good to eat. Fred and I became inseparable in the camp. We stood together at roll call. We ate together. We tried to get on the same work details. We slept beside each other at night. It was good to have a friend. But one day, I noticed Fred was slower at chopping wood than he had been the day before, and at dinner, he wouldn't eat his bread. "What's wrong, Fred?" "I don't feel good," he told me. He gave me his bread and climbed up into bed. I saved the bread for him in my pocket. He would want it tomorrow, I was sure. But he didn't want it then. He didn't eat his soup at lunch either. I had to do some of his work at the timber yard to cover for him too. That night, as we lay on our shelf, I whispered to him that he had to get better. "I can't, Yannick. It hurts." "What does?" "My stomach, my head, my throat." Fred was sick, there was no doubt about it. But you couldn't get sick in the camps. Not so sick you couldn't work. There was a camp clinic, but no one wanted to go there. People didn't come back from the camp clinic. "You'll be better tomorrow," I told Fred. I saved you some bread for when you're better." Fred wasn't better the next day. He was worse. He couldn't even get out of bed. "Fred, you have to get up," I told him. "You have to move. The capo will come for you soon." "No," Fred moaned. "No, Yannick, go. You have to. Go." "What's this? What's going on?" an angry voice demanded. It was our Barrett capo. He pushed me aside and poked Fred with his club. "Get up. Time for roll call." "He can't," I told the capo. "He's sick." The capo struck me with his club, sending me to the floor. I put my hand to my ear and felt blood. "Get up," the capo told Fred again. He hit him with a club and Fred moaned. I stood up and was about to grab the capo to try and stop him, but another prisoner took me by the arm. "Come away," he whispered. "Come away, boy." The capo hit Fred again and again. "Fred," I yelled. "Get to roll call or you'll get a beating," the capo threatened me. "Yannick," Fred moaned. "Go, please." The capo hit him again as the other prisoner pulled me away. "He's going to kill him," I pleaded with the man. "Yes, and he'll kill you too if you interfere. Is that what you want?" I stood in line at the roll call, watching for Fred. He had to get up. He could make it. He wasn't a muscle man yet. He was just sick. He would get better. Fred arrived at roll call at the very end, but only because he was dragged there by two capos. His face was bloody where they'd beaten him, and he hung limp, not even trying to stand. I fought back the tears that came to my eyes. The capos hauled Fred to the front of the assembly yard where a gallows was built. It was a simple thing, just two standing poles with a bar between them. From the pole hung a rope with a noose tied at the end. The two capos lifted Fred's head into the noose and tightened it, leaving a chair under his feet to keep him from hanging. He was so weak he couldn't even stand, and the rope cut into his neck, turning his face blue. I choked back a sob. "The man says he cannot work," a Nazi told us. "No," I thought. "No, he can. He's a good worker. He's just sick." "Work makes you free," the Nazi told us. "But if you cannot work," the Nazi nodded to the capos, and one of them kicked the chair out from under Fred. He lifted his head for just a moment, long enough for me to see his horrified face, and then I couldn't watch anymore. That night, I said a Kaddish for Fred as I ate his bread, and another vow never to forget.